Good evening. Are we okay? I'm just checking with our film people. We're being filmed here today. Yeah, we're okay. Welcome to the Candidates Forum featuring candidates for the Los Altos Hills City Council. My name is Katie Zoglin. I'm on the board of the League of Women Voters for the Los Altos Mountain View area and the moderator for today's forum. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters as well as the AAUW. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization of men and women established to promote political responsibility through informed, active participation in government. We do not support or endorse political candidates or political parties. But through our nonpartisan policy, we do, after study of issues, sometimes weigh in favor of or against particular policy issues. The League invites anyone who's interested in government, politics, and community engagement to join us. We also encourage you to visit www.smartvoter.org for information about candidates at all levels of the ballot, not just for the town council, but also for propositions and so on, for more voter information. The format for tonight will be that each candidate will get 2 minutes for an opening statement, and then they'll get 1 minute to answer different questions. As you can see, Natalie Elephant, thank you, is passing around cards, so you can write questions for the candidates. Remember that any question should be a question that can be asked of all three candidates, so it should not be geared just to one particular candidate. So please write legibly also when you write them down. And then at the very end, each candidate will have 2 minutes to sum up. We have 2 timekeepers, so we try to keep our candidates on to adhere to these time limits. Shan Chow and Pat Lang in the front row, would you raise your hand? Thank you for being our timekeepers for this evening. They'll give you minute warnings, like 1 minute for your opening and closing, 30 seconds, and 15 seconds and stop. Yeah. And so we just ask you all to please pay attention to that. And we ask the audience, I'm sure some of you have particular candidates that you already have in mind. We just ask that there be no demonstration, no clapping or anything during answers. At the very end, certainly, everyone can show your support, but during the question and answer, we just ask you to withhold any kind of clapping, etc. We also ask everyone to turn off your cell phones if you have those, or put them on silent. And if anyone is, sometimes people do record things on their cell phones. If you do that, we ask you that you do it for the entire program and not just for parts, so that things aren't taken out of context. And let's see, also one flyer that you might be interested in that's outside has a list of all the different dates. Last date to register, places where there's you can do early voting in Palo Alto. Palo Alto is the only place in North County that has a location in the Rinconada Library. You can also vote early at the Register of Voters down in San Jose, but there's a flyer outside that can give you all that kind of information for the election, which, as you know, is November 6th. All right, and so now I'd like to introduce to you
Katie, if I can bring up one thing.
Yes.
It's me. So originally I got a note from the League saying our opening statements would be 2 minutes and closing 2 minutes.
Yes.
And subsequently I got a phone call saying they'd be reduced to 1.5 minutes opening and 1.5 minutes closing. So if we could adhere to that, because I did prepare for that.
Okay. So if that's what the candidates were told, then we'll change it to 1.5, so it's fair for everyone if that's what you prepared for. I apologize. I was not aware of that communication. All right. So timers also 1.5 minutes for opening and closing. So, all right. So we have. We'll first start on your immediate left. George Tyson. Mr. George Tyson is the first candidate, then Ms. Kavita Tonka is our second, and third is George Tyson. just so that you know them all. Neil, sorry, I'm sorry. Neil Ferrari. See, I wrote them down in the opposite order, and then I just got in advance. Thank you. Neil Ferrari. All right, so thank you, candidates, and welcome. Thank you for agreeing to participate in this. We're now ready to begin. And as I understand it, Mr. Tyson is the first one to begin with opening statements.
Very good. I'm not used to, that works pretty well. Thank you, League and AAUW, and I'll take this moment to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm from this area. I was born in San Mateo and grew up in East Palo Alto, where I went to elementary school, and then went to middle and high school in West San Jose in the Cupertino district. And I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship, which took me to UC Berkeley, where two great things happened. I got 2 degrees in engineering, and I met my wife of almost 40 years, Stephanie. Not in that order. And by the way, we were assigned the same dorm floor, so how lucky was I there? So after that, I've had a long career in the first chemical and then pharmaceutical industry, which has taken us to the East Bay and to Michigan and then back to the South Bay 22 years ago. I've worked in big companies and small, for startups, as well as established facilities. In my career, I've been able to build teams and hire people, to develop large capital projects and manage budgets. Along the way, I also have begun teaching a class at UC Berkeley for graduating chemical engineers, and I'm just coming from that class today, so I'm glad I made it on time. More on the personal front, Stephanie and I have 3 adult children who've all earned graduate degrees and now are leading successful lives. But going into more of the community involvement, it's something that's been with me since day one. At the age of 23, I joined my first nonprofit board, and I've served many roles in the intervening time period, most notably as on the Cupertino School Board, and so I'll tell you more later.
Thank you. Ms. Tonka?
Hello and welcome. My name is Kavita Tanka, and I've lived in this town for almost 15 years. For the last 6 years, I served as your planning commissioner, a job I enjoyed and did well. I've got great experience studying, writing, and drafting town policy and procedures. I've had a front row seat to city government and know what the critical issues are. As planning commissioner, I worked hard. I listened to everybody who wanted to speak to me, and I used equity and fairness as a basic metric in my decision-making. As a former attorney, I believe in working together and finding common ground. As a longtime resident of Los Altos Hills, I've enjoyed the peace and the beauty of the foothills. And as a mother of 4, it's been a really safe place to raise a family. And I'm now running to preserve these qualities for a future generation of citizens. Los Altos Hills' natural setting of rolling hills, oaks, and winding country roads is what makes this place the thing we call home. Where else can you live in the heart of the Silicon Valley and see horses, wildlife, and people enjoying our pathways and open spaces? Preserving this vision of the Founding Fathers is the biggest challenge we face today. I want to continue the work that I've started, and I hope that I can earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ferrari?
All right, thank you for putting on the event tonight for us. So, hello everyone. My name is Neil Ferrari, and I'm running for town council. Both sets of my grandparents have lived in Los Altos Hills. My mother's side has lived in Los Altos Hills for 50 years, and father's side for 20 years. I myself grew up in Los Altos till the age of 13, and then moved to Woodside. And currently I've been living in Los Altos Hills the past 5 years. I grew up with appreciation of the beauty of this town. I want to work for you, and it would be an honor to serve you. I am an active listener, and I will hear out all your concerns. There are numerous experts in the community, and I plan on listening to their input. We have to listen to our residents. It's extremely important. One cannot be on the high horse as a city council member. I want to bring level ground to the city chambers and serve the committees, volunteers, and give them a voice. If you vote for me, you can be 100% sure that I will listen to you. there's a lot of experts in the town, including the residents also and the government staff. I'm all ears to them as well. I want to have a system that works for everyone, and I have the skill sets to make that happen. I can bring a fresh, honest, and civil grounded seat to our city council, and I have the experience to back it up. Since many of you do not know me, I have been in the demolition industry the past 5 years. I've managed some of the largest demolition projects in Northern California, and I'm going to bring my project management experience to the town council. I manage all aspects of the project, including financial updates and all client communication.
Thank you. I think your time is up, Mr. Ferrari.
Okay.
There'll be, we'll have lots of questions to follow up.
Sure.
First question goes to Ms. Tonka. What do you see as the role of a town council member? And what would you see your role with respect to the different town committees?
Let me take the second one first. Let me start by saying that our town volunteers are the solution and not the problem. We are fortunate in that our committee structure is such that it saves our town thousands of dollars in staff time for all the work that our staff would have to do. As a general rule, I think our committees are stronger when new people join and bring fresh ideas. Rotating committee chairs, associate members, and term limits keep our associations and committees stronger. That said, we have expertise in town that's been built over time, and such members add value. I do not think that we need hard limits. I think volunteers and committee members serve at the discretion of the council, and we can make a case-by-case determination. In terms of what a city council member can do, I think the city council member is really part of a group of 5 people that work with the city manager.
I think your
Okay, go ahead.
time's up. I'm sorry to interrupt you all, but we just need to move along. Mr. Ferrari, 1
Okay,
minute for
can
your
you
answer.
ask the question one more time?
Sure. What do you see the role of the town, what would you see your role of as a town council member, and what would you see your role if you were elected with the town's committees?
Okay, so my role is the facilitator, right? So I'm taking an input from the town and using my best judgment to execute on a decision-making process. So to give you an example, let's say there's an issue with an owner on a property with a project that's too large, and the neighbor is complaining about the size of the lot. So I would get both that individual that's building the house and that resident that's complaining, bring them here, and we'll do a mitigation on it and work out. You can figure things out by talking and working things out. So I'm really good at that, and I'm gonna be able to do that here at the city. So that's the best way to work things out, is by talking it out, and then it should work.
Thank you. Mr. Tyson?
Thank you. Well, like the others, I see the town council's role as being to be the listener, to be able to bring in the viewpoints from throughout, and then also make good decisions, and then communicate the process of making those decisions to make it rational, orderly, and something that's transparent above all. And in terms of these committees, I also value them. I value them to an extent where I have actually visited, I think, 11 of the 13 committees in the last month or two, because I want to see how they work and what they do and who's involved with them. And open space and parks and rec, they interact and they intersect in many different ways. So as to synthesize that, and then to also sit on some of these committees, I think that's a really important role. And I think that increasing volunteerism in this town is a great thing, and by improving the impact of these committees, they don't just meet, but they make decisions, and then they're listened to. That's what makes them more valuable.
Thank you. This next question, we'll start with Mr. Ferrari. What are your top 3 priorities for Los Altos Hills?
Okay, so I've talked to many residents door to door, and the common themes that come up include burglary, mail theft, safety, fire safety prevention, high brush, dead tree mitigation, speeding in areas where children live, and overall town safety. So those are the there's more than 3, but that's the collective theme that I've been seeing, speaking to residents. So just picking one of those issues, let's say speeding in children's neighborhoods. So there's ways we can mitigate that. So either by installing a sign in that location or like a very small speed bump and protect those children. So I'm very open to using technology tools to improve this town, and I'm gonna listen to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tyson?
Thank you. Well, in terms of top priorities, I would say number 1 is the thing we all talk about, and that is preserving the atmosphere, the semi-rural nature of this town. And what is it that people are most worried about? I'm going to say they're worried that a neighbor is going to skirt or extend the rules and build some monstrosity of a house that impinges upon their view or the views of the ridge lines or things like that. And so by respecting things like our planning commission, open space and other things, to say that we have a general plan, we have guidelines, let's follow them and not let those get pushed around. And so secondarily, I would also say safety. I've been on the fire commission for a little over 3.5 years and have been elected president 3 consecutive years. So I have a great interest and involvement in fire safety. And finally, volunteerism.
Thank you. Ms. Tonka?
The town of Los Altos Hills came about as a reaction to the overdevelopment in Santa Clara County. And the original vision of the founders was to preserve it for future generation. Preserving the original intent of the founders and keeping this town as rural as possible is the #1 reason that I would support this. And I think we can do this by staying true to the general plan, by following our town's ordinances and applying them strictly, and making sure that we stay true to our obligations why we were founded. The second most important thing, I think, is town safety. Due to the recent invasions and home burglaries, people have started to feel unsafe, and I think we need to make the investments to make sure they feel safe. Traffic is another issue, and I think we need common sense solutions in different parts of town to deal with this issue of traffic volume and of speeding.
Thank you. And we'll start with Mr. Tyson for this next one. And I know some of you have already touched on it, but we have numerous questions from the audience to follow up on preserving the semi-rural character of this town. And clearly, it's much appreciated, and people would like to know more specifically what you would do to preserve the semi-rural nature of this community in town.
So I'm going to repeat myself and say, we have a general plan. One of the first things I decided to do when I decided to run was to read through the whole thing. And I have to say, it's very well crafted, and we have stuck with it during all these years. And what it does is it creates more than guidelines, limits for development to make sure that we have a certain density that we're comfortable with, a certain building practice that it allows for aesthetics, and then also things like erosion control. And then the fact that we have small, windy streets, I think people are preferring that rather than making them larger and say, adding curbs or sidewalks. So keeping the development where it is. And most recently, I had a resident ask me, why don't we increase the density here? And I have to say, we do have an obligation to in terms of an affordable housing, and we're already meeting that through our expanded access to second units. We're met the guidelines that we have in terms of affordable housing, somewhat to a surprising extent.
Thank you. Ms. Tonka?
So when it comes to retaining our rural character, I think we need to stay true to our core values as a town. We need to enforce our town codes and ordinances very strictly, and I think we need to follow our general plan. We also need to make sure that we protect our rural character, and the way we protect our rural character is by making sure that we follow our setbacks and enforce them. We make sure that there's space between homes. We preserve our vegetation, and we enforce screening.
Thank you. Mr. Ferrari?
Okay, so being in the demolition industry, I deal with hazardous materials quite often, and I'm gonna keep Los Altos Hills clean with my experience. I want to make sure this town stays pristine in ways that go beyond just keeping the streets clean. Environmental issues such as keeping the creeks clean and our drinking water, having audits on that, making sure that there's not too much chlorine or different chemicals. And also SWIP, which was mentioned earlier, that's the erosion control, so stormwater pollution prevention. So that's for construction sites, making sure that the straw wattles set up around the sites and that no overspill from sites is going to our creeks. That would include motor oil that's leaked on sites from excavators and large equipment, that doesn't leave the sites and that's cleaned up immediately. And I have a very large knowledge of hazardous materials on KM17s, which is heavy metals, VOCs, volatile organic compounds. So I'll make sure that everything's correct and clean in our creeks.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Ms. Tonka. How should the city council, I apologize, town council, how should the town council assess the needs of its residents? How does the town determine if it is addressing the needs of its residents?
I think one of the biggest jobs of the town council is to be attentive to the needs of the residents, and they do that by listening carefully, by keeping an open mind, by talking to all stakeholders, and then making decisions using their own, all the information that they have at their disposal. I think it's but having said that, the most important thing is to keep an open mind and listen. I think that's the best way for town council to make the right decisions. And of course, you work hard, you read all the information that it comes to you, and then you make an independent decision.
Thank you. Mr. Ferrari?
Okay, could I hear the question one more time?
Sure.
Yeah.
How should the town council assess the needs of its residents? How does the town determine if it is addressing the needs of its residents?
Okay, so government, right? So this town's unique in the fact that it seems like a lot of the complaints come to city council directly, and then the city manager, we're directing it to the city manager to correct. We gotta make sure that there's a good flow of work, distribution. Not that that's not the case currently, but I want to make sure that that's really the case because I've been talking to some residents and there's been some issues going on. So I need to investigate and see what's happening. As far as complaints and issues, anyone can come to me and they can have my personal phone number and I'll address whatever issue you have. It doesn't bother me. I'll take care of it.
Thank you. And Mr. Tyson?
Thank you. Well, I think a good example of what the city council could do, what the city council already did, and that was have a resident survey in 2016. And part of my preparation was to read through that. And it was interesting, actually, to find that the level of concerns people have, people want it to stay the way it is to a large extent. So I would say that's a good method, and to make sure that a survey is properly designed and that it reflects what people are thinking, and not just, say, the people who come to meetings, but the broader population. But I'm going to go back to those committees and commission meetings that I've attended. This is the core of Los Altos Hills, the active, involved, engaged citizens. Use them, you've already got them as your voice, and that'll help ensure that you're being sensitive to the issues that are important to people.
Thank you. And this next question will start with Mr. Ferrari. A member of the audience would like to know, how should Los Altos Hills work with its neighboring communities to improve our quality of life?
Okay, so Los Altos Hills, we have a lot of resources here, right? And the other cities are really larger than ours. So honestly, they have the resources to take care of their own needs. I think we should focus on Los Altos Hills itself and take care of and make our city or our town the best we can make it. If we have the extra capacity to help out other cities, yeah, that's great to do that. But first is Los Altos Hills.
Thank you. Mr. Tyson?
Well, Los Altos Hills is a wonderful place, as we've already described, but it's not an island. We're surrounded by other issues. including areas of fire risk, but we have people that go work in areas and have a traffic. I think we're all part of a larger community. So I think it's important to work with the neighboring communities. I'll give you an example. The Open Space Committee, every bit of paving we do here leads to increased risk of flooding in Palo Alto. Should we just ignore that? Or should we be a part of that? Some of the city council roles involve sitting on larger committees, such as Valley Transportation Agency. So to the extent that we have a seat in the table, let's not waste that. Let's see what we can do in terms of regional solutions, because we have extreme traffic issues, we have housing issues, we have job displacement sorts of issues. And so these are all things I think we can gain. And let me throw in the school districts too. I've made a point already of reaching out to the different school districts because we have facilities we can share and we have issues in common.
Ms. Tonka.
So as a general rule, most towns share a variety of resources with each other. And most neighboring towns add some sort of value to their neighboring town. As a general rule, before we start to spend our resources, we need to look to see what there is in it for our residents and what our residents themselves want. And we already have an existing JPA when it comes to the library. It's a great resource, and our residents use that. In terms of the community center and in terms of the theater, those are great assets for our town, but they are the City of Los Altos Hills asset. So I think the most important thing is see what our residents want, and I will be in support of doing joint programs as long as they meet the needs of our own community.
Thank you. This next question, we'll start with Mr. Tyson first. It's on safety. One member of the audience would like to know, could you talk about safety measures and crime in Los Altos Hills? Are they adequate? What would you change?
You know, it's hard to say that safety is ever adequate, isn't it? I mean, I tell you, it was the night before last, in the middle of the night, I thought I heard the wind whipping, and I thought, oh no, it's October and the wind is whipping again. That's wildfire season. So I think eternal vigilance is one of the things you have to watch out for. I would say on an ongoing basis that our police presence appears adequate to me. That break-in that you may have heard about, did you know how many police cars were there because of this mutual aid that we have? This is part of the previous question. We share resources with neighboring communities, and it helps us to a great extent. And so in terms of safety, I feel like we're in pretty good shape, but we can't rest on our laurels, and we need to always see what's the best thing that can preserve the safety that we think is so important.
Thank you. Ms. Tonka?
Town safety is one of the biggest issues for many of our residents. Now, the reality is we are very safe as a town. We've just been voted as the #1 residential community in the nation. That said, it's not just to be safe. Our residents need to feel safe. And as of now, there is a general sense of feeling unsafe. And we need to make all the investments to make sure that people are feeling safe. If that means additional law enforcement, we have a $20 million surplus. We should make the necessary investments to make our citizens feel safe.
Okay, so going to the town safety, that's one of my top priorities. And so I'm an inventor. I come up with new ideas all the time. And I have a technology improvement that we can make in town. I don't want to stir up too much controversy here, but I'll share it with you independently and throw it back off of you and see what you think about it. There's no invasion of privacy or anything, but we can talk about it one-on-one if you guys would like to hear what my idea is. And as far as if we need additional town support, you know, if there's another officer that's needed, we can look into that. You know, I don't know if it needs to be an 8-hour shift at some point of the day, but we can look into that.
Thank you. Thank you. And this next question will start with Ms. Tonka. How should the town help address the region's severe housing shortage?
So we are all very well aware that great wealth sucks up housing and healthcare. And as a town, we need to do our part to make sure that we are providing enough affordable housing right here in our own town. And the town of Los Altos Hills does this by encouraging secondary dwelling units on our homes. They are fast-tracked, they're ministerial approval, that means no notice, no hearing. There is no additional driveway required.
There's only one parking required, but that can be in tandem or in front of a parking spot. We've also thought of other things, maybe a development area bonus for the people that build a secondary dwelling unit. Maybe we don't ask for a pathway fee if all that a person is doing is adding an additional unit. Things to think about.
Thank you. Mr. Ferrari?
Okay, sorry, I was a little distracted by someone in the audience. You'll have to repeat the question.
Sure.
Sorry.
How should the town help address the region's severe housing shortage?
Okay, so that's a very complex question. Obviously, we know a lot of people are driving in from Fresno, Sacramento into the Bay Area to work. And it seems like there's no end in sight, really, or a long-term solution. Honestly, I really need to think about what we can do as far as relieving this. I thought about earlier today, one way to relieve internal traffic issues, let's say between San Francisco and San Jose, is Elon Musk's idea of the underground Hyperloop. And if it's actually cost feasible, that would be a good option for improving traffic. That's just one option. Obviously, we'd have to see if that's feasible or not, cost-wise. But as far as improving outside traffic and people and housing, I have to come back to you guys on a solution for that.
And Mr. Tyson?
Well, unfortunately, Kavita already said it all. But I do have a minute and a half, don't I? So it's funny, I got an email yesterday. It was from a resident who said, this semi-rural thing, I don't believe in it. It was fine when I moved here, but now it's 40 years later, and it's our responsibility to make smaller lots and increase the density. And it's very hard for me to say no to a voter, you know? But I did. And I said, you know what? We moved here on purpose. We have a lot size on purpose. And if we want to improve our housing, let's do it near the transit centers and near the employment centers where it makes sense instead of putting it up some windy road in Los Altos Hills. So I'm not going to go that way.
And thank you. This next question, we'll start with Mr. Ferrari. How have you been involved in Los Altos Hills activities, committees, and other volunteer support services? How has that prepared you for responsibilities of city council decision-making?
Okay, so I'm relying heavily on the volunteers and the committee members, the residents for input. Most of my experience is in the private sector and doing these demolition projects and private work and experience in that area. So I'm going to look to the town for input on. I've already obviously talked to a lot of residents on what they'd like to see improved, and so I'm going to suck that in from everyone and work for them. That's the best I have for you guys.
Thank you. Then, Mr. Tyson, and I just wanted to let you know, Julie's going to carry on for me because I am not feeling well, so my apologies, and we'll just continue on with, let's see, next person, with Mr. Tyson.
Thank you. Katie just flew in or overseas late last night. Yeah, I've got that right. So, and at the league, we help each other out wherever we can. I've been a moderator for a couple of other candidate forums, so I'll just pick up here. And I'm Julie Cates, and I also am a member of the League of Women Voters for Los Altos Mountain View. So, if you give me just a moment, see where we are. I'm going to do a fun one. I'm going to do a fun one here. Okay, great. And we're going to start.
She already asked a question.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay. I'm going to ask you, can you repeat the question?
You don't have to repeat it for me. The question was, how have I been involved with Los Altos Hills and contributing to the community? And just to be clear, we moved to Los Altos Hills 9 years ago, but we lived in Cupertino 13 years before that. So we've been in this area for quite a long time. So my short answer is I've been on the Los Altos Hills County Fire District since 2015. And as I said, been president for 3 years, consecutive years. But before that, it goes back a long ways. I was on the Cupertino School Board. I was elected to that position, served there for 4 years. I was on West Valley Community Services Board for 7 years. And so the whole notion of community awareness and involvement is something that takes back even to when I was a scout leader, in a leader in Rotary, as well as in children's sports. So many different ways. And let me just say, I'm no stranger to the Brown Act and making public meeting decisions. And I think that's a really critical background that I can bring to this, because we need to do our work in public and we need to follow those rules in terms of public meetings.
Thank you. And Ms. Tonka?
As a longtime planning commissioner of this town, I've been reading, writing, and applying town policy and procedure for
6 years. I've had a front row seat to city government, and I know exactly what the critical issues are. As town planning commissioner, I worked hard, listened to all stakeholders, kept an open mind, and made tough decisions. And I want to continue that in my new role. As a resident of this town, I really enjoyed living in the foothills. The peace and the quiet has been amazing. And as a mother of 4, it's been a safe place to raise a family. And I want to preserve all of these qualities for the next generation. And more than anything else, I'm aware of the 2 groups that we have in town, and I feel that I'm best able to manage the expectations. I understand that some change is inevitable, but we have to make sure that any change that we embrace is in keeping with our core values as a town, and we make sure that we preserve the rural character of this town.
For our next question, we'll start with Mr. Tyson, then Ms. Tonka, and then Mr. Ferrari. And the question is, should the town invest in a new or greatly expanded town hall complex? And if so, how should it be funded? And what would the return be to our community?
Okay. The question is, should we invest in I think you said large or massive, greatly expanded town
The wording,
town hall?
new or greatly expanded town hall complex.
Okay, so as part of preparation for this running for office here, I've walked through the city offices, I've walked through the history house, I've looked to see how the facilities here are being used. And I have to say, and I've looked at the plans too, and those are modest plans, if they appear to me. And so from what I've seen so far, we're in the early stages of this process. I see there's a strong value of having a modest increase in the facilities here. They will improve the worker efficiency and also access to our residents of these facilities for the committee sorts of meetings that we've talked about are so important to have. And so how would they be funded? What I'm talking about is, I think, a small, relatively funded expansion that would fit within our budget.
Ms. Tonka?
I want to echo what George has just said. My understanding is that the plans for the town hall expansion are relatively modest. The reality is that our current office space is congested. There is overcrowding. We have planners sharing office rooms. We have town staff in photocopier rooms. And we have employee break rooms being used for meetings. We also do not have enough meeting rooms for our resident committees and town staff and people to meet. As of now, the conference chambers are being used as meeting rooms, yoga rooms, and we need to figure that out. Also, we have new people moving into town. It's a growing demand for community-based programs for our children and our youth. We also have an aging population, and I think we need to make sure we have space to do things for them. So I think most importantly, we need to hear from our residents, see what they want. This project, like any other project in town, should go through a public hearing process.
Okay, so the papers, there's going to be an article in the Town Crier next week about this, so I'm just going to read you my response for that. So town staff has shown me a preliminary drawing mock-up. I have physically seen the Parks and Rec Department employee access. The current setup is not optimal or ideal, especially if meetings are occurring during staff working hours. The Parks and Rec office door connects to the meeting room. This means if a meeting is occurring and the staff have to leave their office, the employee will interrupt the ongoing meeting. The additional space is needed. However, we need to make sure that the town and taxpayer dollars are being spent wisely, with upfront analysis of cost and a defined scope. I want to make sure this is done in the right way and make sure we limit change orders and the expansion is sufficient the first time around. And since I'm in the construction industry, I can make that happen.
Thank you. For the next question, we will start with Ms. Tonka, go on to Mr. Ferrari, and then end with Mr. Tyson. And the question is, should cannabis be allowed to be cultivated within town boundaries?
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
Should cannabis, marijuana,
Oh.
be allowed to be
I heard
cultivated?
candidates, and I was
Yeah.
I did too.
So recently, the Planning Commission, this matter came up to the Planning Commission, and under state regulation,
You're allowed to grow 5 or 6 plants. Every homeowner is allowed to grow 5 or 6 plants, and to keep in conformance with state regulations, the City of Los Altos passed ordinance allowing the growing of 5 to 6 marijuana plants and within the home. And the City Council amended that, and they said it was okay to plant these plants outside, but they had to be not within view of the neighbors, and they should be in a place where it's not possible to be seen.
so what we did was just to conform with
State
state
law.
Mr. Ferrari.
So this falls in line with San Mateo County too, right? I believe if the regulations haven't changed, it's 12 immature and 6 mature plants. So that means if they get mature, you have to cut down 6 other plants. So I think it's okay. Like most people, hopefully they're not doing it for recreational purposes, that there's actually a medicinal purpose for it. You know, say if a resident has cancer, right? Marijuana is really good for appetite, and it's going to help them eat, you know, and have a better success of life. Pills, that's kind of the old mentality and thought process that pills are going to work better. Marijuana actually works better than a lot of these hardcore drugs. So if you're against that, you can talk to me and we'll have a personal conversation about it, but that's the real truth for that. So as far as growing inside or outside, I mean, as long as it's not out of, you know, it's not in view where someone's going to want to rob your house for it, I think it's okay.
Thank you. Mr. Tyson?
Well, I'd like to compliment whoever asked that question, because you spend your evening going to a forum like this, you want to shake up some candidates and see what they make. This is a good way to do it. Come up with a question that makes everybody a little queasy, and I'm queasy too. And because this has all moved very fast, I don't think we're all quite used to it. I tell you, I teach a class in Berkeley, so let me just stop there. And so, yeah, I'm kind of queasy, but let's follow the law. And I think the law, what the city council did, is appropriate. And let's see how it plays out.
Right. Okay, next question. This time we're going to start with Mr. Ferrari. We're going to wrap around to Mr. Tyson and end with Ms. Tonka. And the question is on noise abatement. And what is your stand on noise abatement? And what would you do about it?
Okay, so noise abatement. So is this for construction projects or just everything in general? And it could be anything? Okay, so there's a dB limit that's set. Usually it's 95 decibels for construction. So if you're outside of the construction site, usually like a few hundred feet away, you're not going to be over that limit. So it's really, as long as you're in the working hours for the town and not working outside of those, there shouldn't be any issue. The loudest construction activity you're going to hear is probably grinding or breaking of concrete with a hoe ram hammer on an excavator. And that's pretty loud, but that's the loudest it gets. And I think for the town and the size of the lots and the demo, it's not going to be that long, and you're not going to have to deal with it that long. But you can contact me if there's a real issue.
Mr. Tyson.
Well, I want to go on record as saying I do all my own yard work and I don't own a leaf blower. Well, anyway, we have regulations in terms of noise, and they refer to the noise level as well as the time of day, and I feel like it's just a question of enforcement. And then let's face it, let's not go running to the authorities if you have an issue with a neighbor. let's contact them first. Let's try to do it the right way. And if they're not going to be receptive to that, then we escalate. But I think a normal communication to do that, what we have written, I don't know that we need new regulations, but to the extent that noise is intrusive to somebody and it's beyond what those regulations do, we should have a logical way to address that.
So we have a noise ordinance that measures the total amount of noise measured at the property line to be
below a certain number. And it's different during the day and it's different during the night. That said, our code is enforcement driven, so it's complaint driven actually. So you could either call your neighbor and talk to them about it, or you could call town hall and they would come in and take a look at it. This could be when it comes to construction, parties, or any other violation of the noise ordinance.
For our next question, we'll start with Ms. Tonka, go to Mr. Ferrari, and with Mr. Tyson. This is a question submitted from the audience. Bear with me. Will you comment on the planning process in way of, with the construction of large homes taking years, will you work to have town ordinances, that includes setbacks, fence requirements, noise, etc., that apply to finished homes, also apply to homes under construction, rather than the anything goes philosophy that currently applies to construction projects? So, all the guidelines ordinance that are for finished homes, what should be followed during those many years of construction? And for this question, we start with Ms. Tonka.
So we already have ordinance in place that restricts the number of years under which a home can be under construction. In the past, we've had homes in town that went on for 10 years, and that was very intrusive to many of our residents. So the Planning Commission and the City Council worked together to create an ordinance that regulated the number of years a home could be under construction, and that has helped significantly. And it has also come to our attention that in terms of regulations that apply to completed homes should also start to apply to homes under construction. People have talked about making sure that maybe we should not allow parking and the use of machinery in the setbacks, because we have rules against what you can put in your setbacks, and there's been talk about extending those rules to the setbacks as well.
Mr. Ferrari?
So obviously it's important that we're in the working hours, nothing outside that. What's the current duration that a project can go on for construction for a house?
Depends on the size of the house.
Okay, but what's the max? How many years?
3 years, I think.
3 years, okay. Okay, so 3 years. So I think that could get maybe cut down to 2. That would be nice, right, for residents that have to deal with noise for 3 years. Besides that, I really don't have any other comment.
Mr. Tyson?
Well, I think what Kavita described is the ongoing process, and I think we should just picture what's reasonable. Should they be allowing a parking within a setback area for a home under construction? My own feeling, and I haven't studied this, would be we could allow a little bit of leeway, but once something goes on for a long enough time period to fall under the rules of finished construction. But let's offer some flexibility to allow the construction to happen. I think we all know that there's quite a shortage of construction capability here, and so I can see this only getting worse in terms of extending the time for construction. So it's good if we try to get ahead of this.
So this will be the last question before we go into closing statements. And I'm going to start with Mr. Tyson, and then Ms. Tonka, and Mr. Ferrari. And the question is, so in your view, in your 4-year term as a council member, what will success look like at the end of the 4 years, in your view?
Wow. Success, what it would look like? Well, I haven't said that much about it in terms of my background. I have an MBA in finance as well as the degrees in engineering from UC Berkeley. And so I have a long history of managing capital projects as well as finances. So I would say first first and foremost, we're in a boom time. Let's make sure that we keep our spending in proportion and that we don't do anything to damage the budget or our reserves. And so let's spend our money wisely. Let's make improvements to our infrastructure. Let's change with the times. As you've heard about increasing number of seniors, let's adapt to our children. Let's make sure that we are adapting to those times and we leave the town in a healthy financial state and that we have all of our committees filled to the brim with eager people. That would be one form of success I would take very proudly.
Ms. Tonka.
Our town has been voted as the #1 residential community to live in, and I hope to be able to continue to maintain that status. We're a great town to live in. We have growing property values. We have a budget surplus, and I'd like to make sure that we keep an eagle eye on our finances. We have a good surplus, but with that comes the obligation of spending wisely. We need to make sure that we keep a lid on our finances. Issues of traffic and aircraft noise are bothering a lot of our citizens. We need to make sure that we have common sense solutions to these issues. We need to make sure that we address all the problems that our residents are facing, because the reality is that we only do what is in the best interest of our residents, and we have to keep an eye on that and make sure that we address it at every level.
Mr. Ferrari.
Okay, so there's a lot of things I want to do. One is test all our creeks, so do random sampling in the creeks, test for the heavy metals, the VOCs, so any children that want to wander in the creeks, we know that those are perfectly clean. The other thing is I want to make sure that we preserve our nature, like our walking trails. There's kind of an issue going on between the annex area and the pass there. I'll mitigate that and finally resolve that issue. It's going to be some tug of war, but I will take care of it. And let's see what else. Any issue that really comes to me, I'll roll with it, and I'm going to help you out and address it for you. Like, I'm a neutral person, and I'm very receptive, so, yeah.
Thank you, candidates. We'll now move to closing statements. And again, I just want to confirm, you were informed that you would have 1.5 minutes for closing statements? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's what we'll follow. And for the closing statements, for this order, we'll go through Ms. Tonka, then George Tyson, and end with Mr. Ferrari.
Thank you. Over the years, we've seen some incredible changes in the area we live in. Great wealth has been created, and many have had incredible opportunities. But with that comes the threat of change. To address this, your city council will need to be proactive, efficient, and responsive to your needs. We have healthy reserves, rising property values, and a town that has been ranked the #1 residential community in the country. For the next 4 years, we have our work cut out. We'll need to address the issues of traffic and airplane noise, stay true to our core values, and apply our ordinances strictly. And most importantly, follow our general plan. If elected, I will work hard to preserve the semi-rural character of this town, build community-based programs for our youth and seniors, and make sure that I bring a fresh and independent voice to the office. Local government is where we can have the most impact and participate in the decisions that most impact our lives. I have the experience and the skill to do the job, and I'm ready and eager to serve. I hope that you will put your trust in me, and thank you for coming out tonight.
Mr. Tyson.
I want to thank you all for coming out tonight and spending your time to help make this important decision, and also thank you to the league as well. And I know you'll already do this, but I want you to go back and look at your ballots, which are just arriving, and read those ballot statements. At the end of mine, it says, I'm ready to hit the ground running. And what do I mean by that? It means I have the background, both in business and in community organizations and in sitting on boards, to serve you as well as I can. But it's not just the background. I'm willing to do the homework. I've attended council meetings. I've attended committee meetings. I've walked through the properties. I hike regularly on these trails. I'm prepared to do the groundwork to make sure that I understand what you're concerned about and what needs doing. And so I would just like to close by saying I've been endorsed by every sitting city council member in this town. I've been endorsed by everybody I've served with on the fire district. I've even been endorsed by everybody in the Cupertino School District that I served with back in the day. So people that have worked with me want to keep working with me, and I would like you, and I hope that you'll give me that chance to do that for you.
Thank you. Mr. Ferrari.
I'm a very innovative person. As an inventor, I come up with new ideas all the time. It's extremely easy for me. I want to address the concerns of the residents, volunteers, committee members impartially with solutions to any and all issues. I want to introduce fresh ideas that the residents and I have brainstormed and implement them. I can improve town technology and hold the expectation of a functioning government. I will ensure proactive management results across the board, including our government, and check our current systems in place to make sure everything is running as efficiently as possible. I am, after all, a project manager. We look for processes that can be improved and made more efficient. This includes money management. I'm very good at money management. I care how much things cost. This includes the project here. It's going to cost a lot of money. We need to make sure it's done right. I don't like to waste money unnecessarily. The other reason I need your vote is quite significant. Our country is in a major deficit. We have 10 years left probably with our A rating for our bonds, and there isn't much time left to correct our balance and budget. Once I display all the improvements to our town, I can carry on to higher positions of power where real change can be made and eventually reach to the federal level. I can be in positions of power to be able to make changes on our debt per person and continue to increase higher and higher. It looks like I have to stop.
Thank you. Well, that ends the closing statements. I think we all would like to thank the candidates for participating in this evening's forum. And we'd like to thank the League of Women Voters volunteers who were all here, to help make this forum possible. So let's give them all a round of applause.
Thank you.
Okay. And we have a couple, do stay for a couple of announcements. I did want to check. Candidates, you can remain a little bit longer to meet with individual, folks individually. So feel free to take advantage of that. I have some, let me make my closing league comments and then we'll move on to other announcements. And so this forum has been designed to impart information to you, the voter, in accordance with our league's belief that a democratic government depends upon the informed and active participation of its citizens. We hope that the insights you gain from this forum will aid you in making your decision on your election ballot. For more voter information, please visit our Voters Edge website. From there, you can find out about other candidate forums, videotaped recordings of other candidate forums, as well as information sessions on the 11 state propositions and county measures. A couple reminders: the last day to register to vote or update your registration is Monday, October 22nd. And you can cast your ballot now up until 8 p.m. election night, November 6th. And you can request, the last chance to request a vote by mail ballot is October 30th. So we always invite you to join us in the league, and we have information on the tables right outside on how you can join, because it's with all our help that we're making democracy work. And thank you. We'll take any announcements now.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, real brief. For those of you who know, we have an annual tribal event, if you will, and it's called SOD. And it stands for Sudden Oak Death. If you're a part of that community and you want to hear about the latest results, or more important, if you've only just discovered what sudden oak death is, and you're worried about it, the next meeting for the sod community is this coming Tuesday, October the 16th, but it will be in the Portola Town Center on Portola Road. More information, if you need it, is available from Sue in the back. The other one I wanted to announce is we're going to have another session for the town as a whole in this room on understanding wildland as it was a few years ago. And we've even had wildfires in town, if you remember, near Page Mill and Arrestadero. So we're going to have a slightly different thing. It's actually a forum with about 6 or 8 speakers, including an ecologist, somebody from the County Fire Safe Council, Mid-Penn, County Fire, PG&E, and we've also asked McClenahan and CAL FIRE to attend. So that will be on October the 30th in this hall, 7 o'clock. See you all there. Thank you.
Thank you.